We're going to get started here. My name's Josh Aaseby. I'm the dev manager with Unity Remote Config. This is Andy Dutch. He's an evangelist here with Unity. You might recognize him from such presentations as the keynote.
For about 5 minutes. Great.
You did great. You're so modest. So today we're going to talk about increasing your iteration speed from inception to launch. So games go through multiple phases along this way, starting with create. When you're building your app, testing, when you're validating what you've created, deploying, when you're releasing what you tested and validated to the masses, and measure, when you're analyzing the game analytics to help influence future iterations. With Unity Remote Config, we hope to increase the iteration time in each one of these phases. And to show this to you today, Andy's going to go through an example of how Unity Remote Config can help the create phase.
Thank you. Thank you for a lovely intro as well.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime.
So I'm going to jump over to Unity here, and I have a small sample project I've created. So rather than showing bouncing cubes, which, come on, we've all seen plenty of bouncing cubes, I want to show basically just like a little small vertical slice of a mobile game. It's not very complicated, but hopefully shows how remote configs can be integrated into not just one area, but lots of areas. Quality settings, difficulty. I'm kind of spoiling all the stuff I'm going to show now, so I'm just going to play the game. So this is a very simple game. It's made using a lot of new things like universal render pipeline, shader graph. Actually, the grass I stole from Book of the Dead, and then brought into the project because I needed some nice, pretty grass, and the team said I was very mad for doing that. So I got this character that runs around in this environment. Also used polybrush to paint the floor. So anyway, we have this character that has this basic pathfinding. And then I could basically spawn an enemy and then kill the enemy. And the enemies then basically chase my character. And then when they're within range, they try and attack you. But I'm slightly faster than them, so they can't quite hit me. It's actually a really easy game because I have infinite health. Because trying to record videos for this when you have health is almost impossible to beat anything. So we've got this game with a couple of different systems, a couple of different mechanics, some input, some enemy AI, some effects, and things like this. And that's great. And usually when you create a game project, you have a bunch of values or variables which are either stored locally in scripts, or locally here, or as a scriptable object or something like this. So here I've got this local enemy spawn amount of 1. So now if I start playing, that value is then going to be used on how many enemies are spawned. So if I kill the enemy, but then if I say, oh, I want to spawn 5 enemies onto this local value, update those changes, and then spawn it, I now have 5 enemies. This is very basic stuff. People have been doing this for about 15 years now, so it's nothing new. Now, the difficulty is that this value is then obviously stored on your build. So I then build the game with 5 enemies and think, this is great. I've now got 5 enemies for level 5 or level 3. Josh here plays the game, keeps dying all the time, and he's like, wow, this sucks. And then I find in the analytics that 100% of all players on level 3 are like dying all the time and stop playing the game.
So you're going to give me God mode.
Well, I'm going to make it easier for you.
Okay,
I know how much of a gamer you are. So basically, you don't want to say, right, I now spawn 4 enemies, then have to deploy an update, and no one wants to update all their phones and update their apps and things. If only you had that value kind of stored as a remote config or remote configuration, and be able to pull and update those changes. And maybe you want to test it and not just say all devices, but let's say everyone in Denmark is, let's test everyone in Denmark playing this game, and then test that sort of in a small development rollout, or even device-specific stuff. So this is where remote configs come into play. And if I open up the package manager window right now, what you notice is just like pretty much most new things with Unity, we've got remote config as a package. So if you want to install that, you'll then be able to get this functionality that I'm about to show you. So it's a package here. I have to update to a latest package, but I'm not going to risk doing this on stage right now. I'll do it after the video camera stopped recording. So once you have that remote config package installed, you then get this really handy window called remote config. That's great.
And then named.
Yeah, correctly named. And it's basically this big window at the bottom of the screen here. And this remote config window currently is empty. And I'm going to add like one setting and one value. And then I'll show you kind of like, the finished baked cake with all the nice pretty icing and show you lots of other things that you can do with remote configs. So here there's currently no values or settings. So what we want to do is we want to hook up the number of warriors that are being spawned to remote config, because then when you deploy your device, deploy your game to a device, it's not using that local value, it's using the remote config value. You can push and pull changes to your game whilst it's running live. Sounds scary to me. I've been building games for a long, long time and having to deploy each time, and now it's a very different mentality to think about. So let's just have a look at the code. I'm sorry if you're an artist here and you're now going to have, you now have a second hangover during the day because now you're looking at code on the screen. So this is a super simple script. I actually copy-pasted about 80% of this script from the documentation. This is true. I like cheating as much as possible, so I figured I'd copy-paste it. So there's a couple of key things to look at. One is using this Unity remote config namespace. And if I scroll down, we then got this method called fetch remote configuration. I think this is actually what it's called in the docs. And then here it's basically doing a fetch completed and adding apply remote settings. And then it's fetching the configs. Again, these are two pretty boilerplate things that you get from the docs. So if I go down and look at this apply remote settings method, we then have switch statement for 3 different things that happen when it's actually fetching the values. One is default, so it basically can't get any values, and it uses the value stored on device. So it's already spawning 1 enemy, it's already spawning, it's not spawning 0 enemies, the game's too easy, and then Josh feels very good about himself when he can beat the whole game, and I'm a terrible game designer at that point. But it's basically going to use the values on device, so if someone's not connected to the internet or doesn't have as good connection. The next switch statement is cached. So this basically says that it's using cached values that were pulled last time. So let's say I now spawn 20 enemies, and then the person's not connected to the internet. It's kind of like using that cached value. So it's like not going to become super easy. And the last one, which is the most fun one, is actually remote. So it says, oh, there are some new values. I'll pull those and apply them. And again, I like cheating, so I copy-pasted all of this. I'm going to be brutally honest in this talk. It's my last one at the conference, so yeah. The only actual 2 lines of code I properly added are these 2, which is basically getting the enemy amount from the config. So from the config that's stored in the services project as part of the services system. It's basically doing in the get integer, but you could be like get float, get boolean, get string. You can do some really cool stuff. And here it's basically getting this value that's stored not in the locally in the script or in the project, but it's getting this from the database. Is that
cloud.
Right? I'm looking at you. Whenever I look at you, it means I'm winging it.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
If any Danes are here, it's going musky. There's no Danes here, so I'm safe. And then it's basically just getting this integer, so this enemy amount, and then it's going to my singleton. I'm sorry if you hate singletons here, for my enemy manager, and then applying this value to spawn this number of enemies. And the cool thing about this is I originally built this project just with local values, or actually stored as scriptable objects, and then I moved everything over to use remote configs. So actually, Enemy Manager and various other systems, such as Snow Manager and Quality Settings Manager, have no idea that value is being driven by remote configs. It's kept separately, and it's just a method saying, hey, spawn 5 enemies now. Hey, spawn 10 enemies. So you can kind of keep your game logic or system logic separately from your code. So it's not so heavily ingrained and, yeah.
No different than editing it during playtime.
Absolutely, yeah. So I kept it separate. Would you say most people keep it separate, or some people?
I've seen variations of it completely. We could show you some more advanced, over-engineered ones later that we've gone through.
Yeah. In this case, I've tried to keep it simple. So
the docs are key.
Yeah, copy-paste the docs. That's what I do. I've been getting away with it ever since. So we got this enemy settings _ warrior _ spawn amount value. Cool. The code is already pre-written. So where do we actually set and control this value in the Unity editor? And that's with this remote config window. So I'm now going to just add a new setting. What you'll notice, it'll add a setting with 3 columns. Here is the key. This is the actual string or the value. I'm going to cheat and copy paste. I like copy pasting. My manager's not here, so I can say this stuff. That's the value that's being stored that I'm pulling from script. Then I've got the type. So what value do I want to store this as? So it's not a string. I'm not naming the enemies. I'm not saying if I want to spawn enemies. I can't have 3.8 enemies. Instead, it's an integer. I have a whole number of enemies that I want to spawn. In this case, I want it to be, let's go 3 just for the time being. So I've got that all set up like this. I'm now going to hit push. We'll say loading, please wait. So let's see. I now have 3 enemies that are spawned. This is cool. Let's spawn 30 enemies. Please spawn 30 enemies. I'll blame it on conference Wi-Fi if it doesn't do it.
It's always our scapegoat.
OK, I leave play mode, and then I re-enter play mode, and then it will work, right?
Yeah. Spawn enemy.
Spawn enemy. Oh, yeah, sorry.
There you go.
You can tell I'm very tired, right? Yeah. OK, we now have 30 enemies. Sorry, I should totally look at the actual button I've literally called spawn enemy. Oh, my God.
This is what you get.
It's just a mosh pit now of this is the most violent Viking mosh pit of all time. Luckily, I killed them with 1 arrow, and then, yeah. So, yeah, I now have this value hooked up to spawn the number of enemies. So that's cool. You set up that setting. And there's another thing I want to point out, which is you can add these things called rules. So a rule is kind of like a subset of these settings. So I'll show you in a little bit. You can have 10 settings to hook up to bools and integers and floats and things like this. And rules allow you to set kind of segments for this. So you could have difficulty hard, or if it's snowing in your game, and then push that out to various areas. So what I'm now going to do is I'm now actually going to switch the project. I'm going to do this all on conference Wi-Fi. So pray for me, please. So this is kind of just the demo thing. So do you want to talk a little bit about the services part of things? I'm just dropping you in it now.
Yeah, I think it's really important to emphasize that it is a cloud-based solution. We manage all the server side. So all you really need to do is go download the package, type in remote in the package manager, install it, and you'll have everything you see right here. Not shown in the demo today. We also have a dashboard as well, but we can talk a little more about that later.
So what I've done now, I'm just restarting my phone because I'm about to go on webcam as well. We're going for ambition, network connection, trying to click a spawn button. Someone on YouTube is going to find that hilarious that I can't click a spawn button.
You started with the grass, and now here we are.
Yeah, yeah. So what I've done is I've actually switched the services project from that demo one that I made to this kind of the cake is now out the oven. Here is the pretty icing on top. And what you'll notice is that there's a lot more settings and there's a lot more rules. And one thing I failed to mention is that we actually have 2 types of storage for these. One is development and one is release. Development is basically testing these values locally in the editor, so it all works with the editor, or if you do a development build of the game, right? This is my megacity moment where I pull the phone out and it's already running on device, right? If I switch to release, it's basically simpler settings, but it's basically when you actually deploy your game. So you can actually roll out kind of soft changes and things.
Yeah, you can roll it out to a certain region, as you mentioned before. You can do it by percentage, CPU, et cetera, et cetera. It's all mentioned in the documentation that you're familiar with, right?
I've used the documentation a few times. So basically, kind of the same game. I forgot to turn on a game object. We've all been there. So the really cool thing about this is I can now change these values. And you don't have to restart the app or actually restart the scene. You can actually pull these changes whilst the game is live updating. So for example, here, I've got a few more settings that you can see at the bottom. And I'll read them out if your eyesight is as bad as mine. So one is event setting snow. So Boolean, is it snowing or not in the game? Another one is the amount of health the player has. Another one is the number of enemies that were spawning. Another one is if we render shadows or not, or render post-processing. Very common things like you want to control quality settings. You're getting data that it's 20 FPS on this new Android update. So you're like, right, let's turn off some quality settings, and then no one will notice and push out an update. So now that we're running this game, I can spawn 1 enemy. Someone shout out a number that's not 0 or 1. 7. Thank you. Usually people say 1 million, and then my laptop starts crying. And so if I've now changed this value to 7. I now push. It's pushed. I'm going to fetch those changes, which are then going to that script and applying it to places. And now we have 7 enemies, which I can then kill. Basically what I showed you before. So yeah, pretty much what I've showed you before. This is not a John Wick fantasy game, by the way. I just realized how that could look. But I now have this control board of all these settings which are hooked into this game live. So let's go to this actual rules part and see what I've actually set up. So here is the event of winter. And you can do various conditionals or conditions. A lot of these are in the docs. So one condition is region. So let's say, for example, you want it to snow in a certain location, or you want to push out a Halloween update, because in America they celebrate Halloween a lot more than, say, here. So all the characters have pumpkins on their heads or something. You can basically do by region. So I'm currently doing it to testify DK, which is not Donkey Kong, it's Denmark. So I'm saying all devices in Denmark will basically pull this change. As well as doing this, you could do rollout percentage. So how many sort of devices rollout? So why would you want to use a rollout percentage?
Let's say that you're not sure about a particular setting that you're going to apply, and you want to just try it on a small subset of the same users. This would be an example of that, and you can progressively increase it as you go.
So I'm the only one that plays this game, so I'm going to do 100%, so it doesn't, mess up. The other one's start date and time. So in this case, like a Christmas update, or let's say, for example, the Olympics are on, so you want all your characters to start wearing running shoes, I don't know, something like this. And I basically set it from September to March, it snows. It obviously isn't snowing yet, but it's going to get there very soon. And then here I then got the settings. So when the winter update's published, it enables that snow boolean, and it goes and turns on that snow script that I wrote. So let's turn on this rule. So I've turned on the rule, and then push that rule. Remember, I'm still in play mode, so I'm still testing stuff. Fetch config changes. And then basically, notice how quickly, I'm still running around. I'm still killing, oh my god, like 7 enemies. But basically, all that's doing is it's going to this little script I wrote, which basically says, go to all the objects, swap from this shader graph to this snow shader graph, and turn on this snow particles. So very easily, you can quickly switch to kind of this event type results. And now I'm going to do the really, really fun thing, which is I have my webcam. So there's me and Josh, right? And I've got the game. This is already deployed. I cheated and built this beforehand. Not cheated, just prepared, right?
Prepared.
So I've got the exact same game running around. So I can run around and spawn. I'm not going to spawn enemies upside down reversed, because that's going to be confusing. But this is running that same game. And remember, I just pushed this update of Event Winter. So now if I hit this remote config button, it's then changed on device. It's pulled that Boolean. OK, I'm using my own 3G, not the conference Wi-Fi. But it's pulled that Boolean change. And now I'm still in this exact same game playing this. And let's say, for example, I turn off winter. Obviously, I'm in Denmark, and it's within that time. And then let's... yeah, there we go. It's now pulling. I didn't even have to deploy to the device. The value's already on device there. So yeah, we've got the game running, still running at 60, which is a nice thing to show. But yeah, it's kind of it's pretty straightforward, I'll be honest. And I had this set up in an evening, and that's not marketing speak. I genuinely had it set up in an evening. So what other things have I cooked up? So another one is quality settings. So let's say, for example. We want on Android devices to set up different types of quality settings. So here we could do unity.platform equals Android, or again in the docs it's got Android. You can even do specific OS. So you could say lower end OS doesn't render these render settings and things. You can really segment nicely. So people on grandma playing on an Android phone, on a 10-year-old Android phone, doesn't complain when. It just seamlessly will switch, and then she won't notice too much.
Oh, exactly.
So here I go quality settings, low. Let's enable this and push this, and see what it does. Please push. I'm happy the snow one was fine. Okay, let's actually just try turning on a bunch of different... OK, we've got still a lot of enemies. Yeah, for some reason, OK. So what the quality settings does is, if I have a look at this, let's actually play mode. So what the quality settings has got is it's got these shadows real-time and shadows post-processing settings. And these then hook into the universal render pipeline's renderer. So I kind of try to build this project, and I need to tidy up and then release it at some point.
If you remove the Android, since you're in the play mode,
oh, yeah.
it'll actually help you out there.
I'm definitely not extremely tired right now.
No, it was a good example to show about how it wouldn't affect you in the play.
Yeah, that was definitely very intentional.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, OK, so I removed the Android setting. That's a good point. Sorry about this. Oh, actually, let's turn this off. So now, instead of it just Android, actually, the segmentation kind of worked. This is nice.
Kind of.
Yeah, let's see. So let's enable the quality settings low, which basically turns off. It hooks into universal render pipeline and turns off the shadows and post-processing. There we go. So now the world isn't curved. It's not using the curved world image effect. We have no real-time shadows, but then we can roll out to specific platforms or specific areas, slightly different quality settings and things like this. And let's go and enable hard mode difficulty. So hard mode, so Josh is getting too good at the game. So let's spawn 100 enemies. I think he's getting a bit too big for his boots. Let's push a hard mode difficulty. Fetch config changes. So we now have 100. Oh, my God.
I'm glad you're playing.
Well, these are all object pooled, so I predicted that I'd be. Yeah, so let's now see on device. Fetch config changes. Hey, there we go. So notice that I just quickly iterated and tested. So you can use this for gameplay testing. You could use it for kind of hooking into all sorts of different. Yeah, that's a mosh pit, right? Yeah. Yeah. OK, I'm going to hide this. So yeah, that's kind of like the end of this example. And I'm going to tidy up the project. I'll be honest, it's messy because it's my fault. And then we'll release it at some point in the near future. So I'll cut back to the slides part.
Yeah,
we did this.
Great.
So
I want to make sure that we have time for questions, so I'll go through this pretty quickly. Andy demoed very well, thank you. The create phase, we also have these features available now with the package, along with other services we have. I'll let you read through them quickly. You can follow up and meet with us at the booth later, if you'd like. And then the documentation that Andy is referring to is referenced from the package that you can install now. Remote config is available as a verified package in 2019.3. Thank you all for attending. We have a few.
I do have one question. Which platforms does this work on?
Oh, that's a great question. Right now, I do believe I'm looking at Rambod, who's supposed to be giving this presentation. Rambod, I believe it's everything except for PS4. PS4 and everything but PS4 and Switch. I'm cutting you off. All right.
Yeah, and obviously Android. It works,
obviously Android, mobile, AR, VR, all those. So whole gamut. Is there anything else? Any other questions we have in the crowd? Yeah, we're wondering about the attributes. You're asking about the attributes that we have available for the conditions. They're Unity dot. So we have predefined ones that are Unity dot that we have documented. So platform, CPU, things like that. But we also have custom ones that you can send as well that are prefixed either by app or user. So you just make a struct and you set whatever variables you have. So say you have a score and you want to be able to fetch different configs off that, you can pass it on the request.
So like you get to level 5 without dying, so you make it slightly harder for people maybe, or...
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you don't have to have a big button on the top right to fetch configs. You can obviously trigger that through game logic as well. So, all right. I think we're out of time. If you have any more questions, we do have a kiosk over on the in the operate area. Please feel free to visit. Thank you very much, Andy, for the demo.
Thank you, Josh. Yep.
It was great.
And thanks for coming along.
Thank you for coming.